The story of PT will always be a mystery. The playable teaser, which was revealed to be the next Silent Hill, was a masterpiece of game design and an immediate hit with the fan base, which was later taken down and swept under the rug by Konami after the controversies with Hideo Kojima. Silent Hills as a concept was never fully realized, but what little we see in PT presents the promise of a horrifying and incredible nightmare. Because it is so short, so ambiguous, and the final product was never presented, discussions about PT will always be difficult. We know nothing of the protagonist. We know little of the only named character, Lisa. What we can discern of the plot is just breadcrumbs, leading in the direction of what Silent Hills would have been. Certainly, the title tells us something. Not one Silent Hill, but many. There have always been many Silent Hills. The real town, the other world, nowhere. But titling the game in the plural seems to emphasize a focus on the plurality of Silent Hill, its multiple realities and worlds, perhaps even the multiple versions that are unique to each person, the individual Silent Hills that a protagonist enters, which is unlike anyone else's experience. There's also a heavy focus on the plurality of identity, the question of uniqueness in relation to individual people. The only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you? In Silent Hill, the answer to that question is never simple. Multiple characters have multiple selves, and many of them don't realize it at first. In Silent Hill 1, we had Cheryl and Alessa. In Silent Hill 2, Mary and Maria. In 3, Heather joined her 2 previous versions. And in 4, we had Walter's adult and child selves. It really is a valid question to ask if you are the only version of yourself. In a world of illusions and nightmares that can bring to life the visions from your dreams, it is entirely possible another you is out there, waiting in the fog. PT focuses upon one long hallway, an unreal prison the protagonist is trapped in, very similar to the nowhere places of previous games. We don't see the protagonist or hear him speak, and there are very few notes to find, few pieces of dialogue outside of random radio broadcasts and phone calls. Most of the storytelling is visual, showing us the abandoned, messy house, how it grows more and more surreal and terrible, the ghost that haunts its halls and stalks us, the crying fetus in the sink. All of it tells a horrifying story all its own before a single word is uttered. It's a brilliant example of environmental storytelling, presenting us with the main concept in full without having to say a word extra. We recognize Lisa as the likely vengeful mother of the child, trapped in her own ruined house, abandoned after her death, likely at her own partner's hands given his absence. Japan has a long history of ghost stories focused upon vengeful women. They're called yurei, and though there are many specific types, they all have a few things in common. Black, disheveled hair, white clothes, reflecting the white burial kimonos women would have been buried in, and limp hands and arms hanging at their sides. Their clothes may have been stained where they were injured in life, and they haunt specific people or places, usually where they passed on. Some return as vengeful spirits, others pass on in childbirth and return to the living to try and give their child away. There are many similarities between Lisa and these types of ghosts. Her appearance is both a modernization and westernization of the concept. A white dressing gown, long limp arms, dark hair tied up in a bun. She haunts the house she likely lived in, and her dress is marked where she was injured. What is likely the spirit of her unborn child is nearby, and an early encounter with Lisa involves approaching the bathroom and having her shut the door in your face, perhaps an attempt to protect what's left of her child. Silent Hill has dealt with yurei before. Silent Hill 4's Cynthia returns as a creature visually similar to the modern version of the concept, But further back, we also have another Lisa in the series who has interesting connections to the Lisa from PT. Besides sharing a name, they share a similar fate. The Lisa in PT is a ghost trapped in an otherworld-type place, a cycle she cannot escape from. She was possibly taken advantage of by her boss. It's a vague implication during one of the radio pieces that states she had a job at a grocery store where her boss took notice of her, and that the child came after. Whether it was reciprocal or not is never made clear, and given the power imbalance, it's entirely possible her boss took advantage of her. And Lisa of the earlier games was in a very similar position with Kaufman, blackmailed into caring for Alessa, even engaging in relations with him in Origins. The delicious cherry on the top of this theory is Lisa's footwear. The original Lisa wears bright red high heels. The Lisa in PT wears just one shoe that looks almost the same. These connections might be references or accidental, but given the amount of thought that went into PT, I doubt it was by accident. Lisa from the first game is trapped in a nightmare cycle all her own. When she's first met, Harry attempts to take her with him, and she insists she can't leave. She is trapped in the hospital, unable to move on because of unfinished business. Once she begins to remember, she transforms, taking on an eerie appearance. We don't know how or even if Lisa passed on, but the cutscene certainly implies a grisly fate. She returns once in one of the better endings, to drag Kaufman away, perhaps showing us her unfinished business was revenge, like in many Yurei ghost stories. Lisa from PT is also trapped in an otherworld nightmare. She isn't always attacking the player, perhaps because we are not her husband and not the focus of her revenge. When she does attack the player, she attacks the neck. It's interesting that a photo of her has a giant X marked over her own neck. Though that's not how she passed, perhaps it's a reference to her method of attack. There's also an unused model of Lisa sitting in a bathtub with no head. Perhaps there was at one time going to be more of a focus on this, which was later changed. Lisa has another injury, a missing eye. One photo of her reads, "Gouge it out," and marks out that same eye. And the wording is eerily similar to a biblical passage. Matthew 5:29 reads, "If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell." The missing eye and the gouge it out phrase may be a biblical reference, which sheds new light on the character of Lisa. The passage is a statement made by Jesus from the Gospel of Matthew, part of the Sermon on the Mount. It's a sequence where Jesus describes his own interpretation of the commandments and early portions of the Old Testament, discussing the dangers of thinking of sins as much as acting on them. In fact, the line comes directly from the portion focused on adultery. Here's the whole segment. "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." The conversation is framed from the point of view of a husband, that if a man looks lustfully upon a woman, he has betrayed his wife in his heart, and it is better to cut off the offending limb rather than sin. Of course, most interpret it as hyperbole, which seems obvious, since if the right eye mentioned is sinful, why wouldn't the left eye be? Why not take out both? Because the point is not that the eyes are sinful, but that you should take action to avoid behaviors that lead to sin. But Lisa seems to have taken the statement quite literally. Her right eye is gouged out. But did she do it, or did her husband? And is she guilty of adultery? It seems clear that her husband thought so, and it's likely the reason behind his actions. The baby is interpreted as the child of this relationship, but none of this is concrete, and we have no evidence as to whether this really happened or if it's just what the husband thinks happened. The house shows us only a few things about the unnamed husband, but they are huge clues. There are empty bottles everywhere, and in one scene, the baby discusses how its father drowned his sorrows in booze, referencing the husband. He apparently lost his job, and the family only survived due to the wife's part-time job with the suspect manager. The combination of failing to provide and suspicion of his wife's betrayal, plus a lot of alcohol, likely led to the attack. But there's no proof that the husband is a reliable source of info. His wife's betrayal could have been in his head. It might never have happened. Or the so-called betrayal may not have been her choice. What's interesting is the difference between the writing on the photo and the writing on the walls. The wall writing is a messy scrawl written in the first person, referencing Lisa, apologizing for their actions, saying there's no turning back now. It seems clear the writer is the husband. But the writing on the photograph is clean, somewhat cursive, purposefully very different from the rest. Was this written by Lisa? Did she feel guilty? This either gives credence to the idea she had an affair, or she was simply an abused wife who was made to feel guilty by her husband. Her return as a vengeful ghost seems to imply the second, that in life she felt guilt she shouldn't have, and in death her anger is finally set free. Another note that is clearly from Lisa is on her photograph once the player finishes the 6 fragments puzzle. My voice, can you hear it? This sign, can you read it? I'll wait forever if you'll just come to me. The word choice of I'll wait if you come to me seems to purposefully reference another wife and husband couple in Silent Hill. Waiting for you is such a famous line at this point that the choice seems deliberate. Mary was a wife in a similar position to Lisa, and this line seems to correlate the two. Does this mean Lisa is waiting for her husband or someone else? Unlike Silent Hill 2, we are presumably not playing the role of the husband. The character the player inhabits is not named and isn't seen until the very end of the demo. The connections to 2 are thin, but there are far more connections to another Silent Hill game. There are a multitude of correlations between PT and Silent Hill 4. In fact, it feels like PT is stylized after it, improving upon its concept and going further. You are a player with a first-person camera, trapped in a small space, a home, unable to leave as the area grows creepier and otherworldly. The scene that occurs when Lisa gets the player even plays out similarly to the first cutscene in Silent Hill 4, where Joseph is attacked by Jimmy Stone's ghost. There are a lot of similarities. The use of the peephole motif, which even has writing over it. The inability to fight Lisa, only to try and escape her. The behavior and movement of Lisa's ghost is incredibly similar to some of 4's. The radio broadcasts and phone calls. The bloody fridge implying something horrible within. There's even a mention of an umbilical cord at one point. PT is the culmination of years of Silent Hill building blocks coming together and being masterfully reimagined and perfected. Themes and motifs reworked into a modern style that is breathtakingly frightening. It is a tragedy we never saw the full extent of this project, but what we have is still a brilliant work of art. There will always be questions unanswered, stories left untold. But in a way, is that not just as horrifying a way to end the story? Never knowing the truth, never knowing what happened to Lisa or the protagonist, never being sure if the only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you? Thank you for watching this week's Silent Hill Symbolism. This episode was sponsored by Katie Crime Spree. If you'd like to commission your own episode, click the link in the description below. You can also support the channel on Patreon or YouTube membership. And if you like my work, check out my current Kickstarter for a horror-themed visual novel called Triqueta. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next time on Silent Hill Symbolism.